In July, China sent troops to participate in joint military exercises in Belarus. Meanwhile, in the Asia-Pacific region, the Russian fleet appeared in the South China Sea for joint exercises with the Chinese Navy. The message is clear: despite the pressure of sanctions, China and Russia are united in challenging the West, drawing the world's attention and raising concerns about a potential major conflict. However, the probability of former US President Trump returning to the White House and aligning with Putin has significantly increased following his near assassination survival. These joint exercises by China and Russia seem futile. Nonetheless, even if Trump takes office, it doesn't guarantee that Putin won't ally with the CCP. Therefore, it is necessary to examine what plans China and Russia made during these exercises. Lastly, we will discuss the possible dramatic shifts in the global situation if Trump is elected. China and Russia disrupt NATO's 75th anniversary. On NATO's 75th anniversary, it planned to condemn China as the decisive driving force behind the Russia-Ukraine war. However, China seemed to have anticipated this move and decided to give NATO a surprise. On July 4th, China invited NATO's neighbor Belarus to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, claiming it was a joint anti-terrorism effort. Just 3 days later, China sent 70 military personnel to Belarus to participate in the Eagle Strike 2024 Joint Army Training. Officially, it was called an anti-terrorism exercise. However, the location of this anti-terrorism exercise is only 2 kilometers from the Polish border and 20 kilometers from Ukraine. In other words, the Chinese army traveled thousands of miles to land on NATO's eastern front. Is this military action really just for anti-terrorism? Even the most formidable terrorists couldn't break through NATO's defenses and fly across vast Siberia to invade China's heartland. It is clear that China has other intentions. By conducting exercises at NATO's doorstep, China is sending a message to the West. The more you try to contain China in the Asia-Pacific region, the more likely the CCP will team up with Russia's allies in Europe's heartland. One side set up a NATO liaison office in Tokyo, the other conducts joint training on NATO's border. NATO troops press on the border, turmoil in the Caucasus situation, China steps into the forefront. All of this is peculiar. Since the Ukraine war, China has supported Russia from behind the scenes, but now it has suddenly stepped into the spotlight. Why? The reason is simple. If China doesn't intervene militarily, Russia will really be unable to hold on. Currently, all of Europe is diplomatically and economically pressuring Russia. Even Serbia, Russia's staunch ally, had to sell ammunition to the West under economic pressure, decisively supporting Ukraine. In Russia's camp, the only steadfast allies left are Hungary and Belarus, but even Belarus's loyalty is in question. Anti-government forces supported by Poland are eyeing an opportunity to overthrow Lukashenko's regime. If Belarus also turns to the West, Russia will be completely isolated in Europe. Meanwhile, NATO's military presence in Eastern Europe is steadily increasing. Currently, over 10,000 military personnel are deployed on the Polish border. Ukrainian troops are also on high alert at the Belarusian border, ready to respond to potential conflicts. In the Baltic Sea, 20 NATO warships, including 2 attack nuclear submarines and 2 aircraft carriers, are stationed. This fleet, equipped with over 350 cruise missiles, can precisely strike Belarus and Russia's western regions at any time. The situation is rapidly deteriorating not only in Europe, but also in the Caucasus region in southern Russia. Armenia, once pro-Russian and a member of the Collective Secretary Treaty Organization, quietly attended the NATO summit without informing Russia. Russia is extremely regretful but helpless about this development. The Caucasus region, including Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, has always been Russia's traditional sphere of influence. Now, NATO has successfully impressed Armenia, initiating an encirclement of Russia from the south. The Caucasus also borders Iran, putting this southern Russia's ally at risk of moving towards the west, especially with the recent election of a pro-Western president in Iran. With NATO's encirclement from the north and south, Russia is facing severe crisis on all fronts. At this critical moment, China's high-profile joint training with Belarus carries significant political and military implications. China is signaling that the Sino-Russian strategic partnership can withstand challenges. This also serves as a message to Putin. If Trump attempts to court you, stand firm. Losing Putin as an ally would put China at a greater disadvantage in its confrontation with the West. Joint training targets NATO bases. Europe may become the main battleground. Let's look closely into the content of this Sino-Belarusian joint training. According to information released by the CCP on July 12, the main subjects of this training include parachute infiltration, hostage rescue, and reconnaissance guidance. On the surface, these are common anti-terrorism training subjects. However, a deeper analysis reveals that these subjects have little to do with anti-terrorism. Instead, they appear tailored for special forces training. Parachute infiltration is typically used to break through enemy lines and carry out surprise attacks behind enemy lines, a critical aspect of military conflict but not common in anti-terrorism operations. Hostage rescue often involves decapitation operations against key enemy targets. This is not a focus of anti-terrorism, but more of a targeted military strike. Reconnaissance guidance is for providing targeting locations for long-range firepower, a purely military task unrelated to anti-terrorism. These training subjects indicate that the true purpose of the Sino-Belarusian joint training is likely not anti-terrorism but preparation for future special operations. Such operations are clearly aimed at substantial military opponents, not terrorists. To execute these special operations in practice, local military conditions must be considered. Special forces need to be familiar with local weapons, understand communication frequencies, and grasp basic language skills to avoid detection during infiltration and sabotage. Therefore, China's military training in Belarus may include reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Military experts from the U.S. RAND Corporation point out that if Chinese special forces conduct infiltration and sabotage operations in Eastern Europe, it could severely disrupt NATO's military deployments, interfere with its command systems, and pose a significant threat to NATO's eastern flank defenses. Moreover, Poland has already established a no-fly zone in western Ukraine, and Ukrainian F-16 fighter jets are about to join the fray. These aircraft, which perform air missions, heavily rely on air bases in Poland and Romania. China's military exercises in Belarus may involve training special forces to use drones or other means to threaten NATO air bases in Eastern Europe. If China and Belarus collaborate in this area, the consequences could be dire. Not only would Eastern European countries like Poland and Lithuania be directly affected, but the entire Europe could be overshadowed by the Sino-Russian alliance. Europe may become the main battleground for Sino-Russian and Western confrontations. As the US and NATO tighten their encirclement of China and Russia, they are making new military moves in the Pacific region. On July 13, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced on Telegram that 2 frigates of the Russian Pacific Fleet, Gromky and Zetsky, would participate in a 3-day joint naval exercise. The exercise is called Maritime Interaction 2024 in China and starts July 15th, focusing on joint air defense and anti-submarine operations. Notably, due to the poor condition of Russian surface ships, these 2 frigates required tug assistance during port construction. Meanwhile, Russian nuclear submarines are likely to stealthily enter the South China Sea. Compared to Russia, the CCP's military presence is substantial. The missile command ship, missile destroyer Nanning, missile frigate Xianning Dalian ship, and comprehensive supply ship Wei Shanhu all made appearances. CCTV and the Chinese Navy conducted grand publicity and welcome ceremonies for this event. Western countries have clearly warned that if China continues to align closely with Russia, it will certainly face sanctions. Despite this, the CCP's high-profile promotion of this military exercise is undoubtedly a challenge to the West. What must Xi Jinping really be thinking? Does he genuinely believe the West won't dare to take action against China? Or does he think the Chinese Communist Party is now powerful enough to disregard sanctions? Recently, NATO, especially Europe and Macron, have shown clear coldness towards Xi Jinping, causing him to lose face, despite domestic propaganda efforts to restore his image and portray him as a world leader. NATO's direct labeling of the CCP as a malevolent force has left Xi acting as the head of an axis of evil. This humiliation must have enraged Xi Jinping, given the CCP's principle of retaliating against even the slightest insult. A hardline stance and various military exercises are inevitable. This joint naval exercise with Russia is the CCP using Russia's banner to show off its strength in the South China Sea. On the other hand, Russia's dissatisfaction with the CCP is growing, forcing Xi Jinping to prove his loyalty to Putin. Not only have naval bases in the northeast China and Qingdao been opened to Russia, but even Zhanjiang Naval Base, the headquarters of the South Sea Fleet, is now open to Russian forces. Although officially, this exercise is described as anti-submarine training, in reality, it allows Russian submarines to familiarize themselves with the hydrology and terrain of the South China Sea. Russia can also practice tactics and potentially remain hidden to counter U.S. carrier strike groups. Chinese surface ships patrolling the South China Sea are often accompanied by either Chinese or Russian submarines, with the surface ship acting as decoys to draw U.S. firepower, protecting the submarines. This joint fleet cooperation greatly benefits Russia. Currently, NATO has blocked Russia's Baltic and Black Sea outlets, leaving the Pacific as Russia's only remaining access route for its nuclear submarines. However, Vladivostok port freezes in winter and is too close to Japan, frequently monitored for anti-submarine activities. Entering the South China Sea would allow Russian submarines to evade U.S. and Japanese surveillance, supported by Chinese surface ships, significantly enhancing their operational capabilities. Russian submarines, although quiet, are still targeted by the U.S. Once a Russian nuclear submarine launches a torpedo, it is promptly sunk by the U.S. Now, with Chinese surface ships providing cover, U.S. submarines can't get too close, broadening Russia's submarines' tactical options and survival chances. Even if the Sino-Russian joint fleet is defeated by the U.S., the first to suffer losses would be Chinese surface ships, while Russian submarines could remain hidden in the deep sea and possibly retreat to Chinese coastal waters. If victorious, Russia would gain significantly, potentially expanding its reach and even becoming the dominant power in the Pacific. With Chinese ships taking the initial hits, Russia is almost guaranteed an easy win. Putin must feel this is a windfall. China has spent decades and billions of dollars developing its surface fleet, only for them to become bodyguards for Russian submarines, an ultimate act of self-sacrifice and altruism. Xi Jinping likely never imagined he would end up protecting Putin. Xi Jinping has little choice. Despite grand ambitions, his actual capabilities are lacking. The PLA's Type 93 nuclear submarine suffered a catastrophic failure during an exercise in the northern Yellow Sea last August. This resulted in the deaths of all 55 crew members due to an air management system issue. Thus, the Chinese Navy must rely heavily on Russian submarines to contend with the U.S. Navy. With Russian submarines as the backbone and numerous traps laid by the CCP on the South China Sea seabed, which damaged a U.S. Seawolf-class nuclear submarine in 2021, Xi Jinping feels emboldened, even dismissing the 2016 South China Sea arbitration. On July 12, Chinese media again stated that the Philippines' reiteration of the arbitration case cannot conceal its provocative infringement. The signs of escalating tensions in the South China Sea are clear. By courting Belarus in Europe and bringing Russia into the South China Sea, the CCP is signaling a comprehensive confrontation with the West. Domestically, China is also making wartime preparations. According to rumors on WeChat, a staff member at the National Development and Reform Commission spent 53 minutes on the phone discussing war preparedness and relocating to Chongqing. This indicates the seriousness of the situation, which starkly contrasts the rosy picture painted by Chinese official media. Some companies are taking on numerous civil defense projects, and there is talk that war might be imminent. It is clear that the CCP is adopting a hardline external stance while internally gearing up for conflict. Despite Trump's narrow escape from assassination, reports suggest that citizens had already spotted the gunman and alerted authorities, but the response was inadequate. This incident has significantly increased Trump's chances of reclaiming the presidency, a development that could alter the global landscape. The Democrats aim to thoroughly dismantle Putin's regime, democratize the Middle Eastern monarchies, and vigorously pursue the Indo-Pacific strategy. In contrast, Trump might temporarily spare Putin, allowing internal strife in Europe while simultaneously benefiting the US. In the Middle East, he might support Israel directly against Iran, avoiding intervention in the affairs of the Middle Eastern monarchies. However, Trump's approach to containing the CCP in the Indo-Pacific might be even tougher than Biden's, though he may not agree with Putin against China. At the very least, he could ensure Putin doesn't aid China. Additionally, Trump might reopen negotiations at Panmunjom, potentially causing North Korea's Kim Jong-un to reveal many CCP secrets, amplifying global condemnation of the CCP. Nevertheless, until Trump takes office in January next year, Russia will face significant pressure. The current Biden administration and several European countries will intensify their support for Ukraine, aiming to weaken Putin before Trump's inauguration. Reports suggest Putin might launch hybrid or unconventional warfare in the Baltic and Polish regions between September and October. Although China may not directly participate in these efforts, its troop deployment to Belarus for joint training signals a clear stance. Sino-Russian joint naval exercises in the South China Sea could temporarily deter U.S. military action against China in the region. Simultaneously, this move helps Xi Jinping stabilize the domestic situation. Losing in the South China Sea could cause domestic turmoil. Xi's hardline external stance and internal war preparations, including orders for various ministries to prepare for war and austerity measures in Suzhou, indicate the CCP is bracing for conflict, even if war may not necessarily break out. As for whether China can win against the West, the answer is clear. If war breaks out without the use of nuclear weapons, an air war in the Western Pacific would likely resolve within 6 months, with the West almost certainly emerging victorious.